Welcome back to our channel as we bring you a new and long-awaited video. We'd like to start off by thanking everyone who viewed and subscribed. What started off as a video made for our friends soon turned into much more. We haven't really decided what we want to do with this channel, but are looking to upgrade and improve our upcoming videos as our first one had some minor hiccups. If you'd like to donate to our channel and help us improve our quality of work, check the description below. With that being said, please enjoy our newest video detailing the horrific unsolved murders at 641 Muriel Court. October 22nd, 1966. It was a lively night for the crowds attending the Florida State game against Mississippi State. Hundreds turned up to support the college team. While most of the town was away from their homes, Dr. Robert Sims, his wife Helen Sims, and youngest daughter Joy had a quiet night in watching television. The other two daughters, Jenny and Judy, were off babysitting for families that were attending the football game. All was well in the quaint and safe town of Tallahassee, Florida. It wasn't until that night that the once peaceful town was struck to its core when Jenny returned home from babysitting to find the bodies of her parents and 12-year-old sister bound, blindfolded, and bloody.
"Something terrible has happened, please come."
Those were the words of Jenny Sims, who came home to find her parents and sister tied up in the master bedroom. It was just after 11 p.m. when Jenny returned home, feeling the high of the football team's 10-0 win. When she entered the Sims residence on 641 Muriel Court, Jenny was surprised to find the television on in the living room, but no one there to watch it. As she called out for her parents and sister, Jenny walked through the house to look for them. There in the master bedroom was both of the parents and her little sister, tied up and blindfolded. Dr. Sims was found on top of the bed with his hands behind his back. He had a blindfold over his eyes and a single gunshot wound to the head. His wife Helen was on the beige carpet beside the bed with her hands tied behind her back and blindfolded as well, except she was shot twice in the head and once in her leg. Their daughter Joy was the worst off of the three. She was lying next to her mother, also bound and blindfolded. Joy had been shot once in the head and stabbed 6 times in the abdomen. Some sources also reported her underwear being around her ankles, suggesting that she had been sexually assaulted. I would like to make a note to say that during research there were slight variations in regard to the state the victims were found and how they were injured. The account I just explained seems to be the most used and accepted, though if you do some research yourself, you will find some inconsistencies. Slight variations in the stories were normal during this time period.
Once Jenny saw what happened, her first instinct was to call for help. In 1966, the emergency line 911 had not been established yet, so there was no central number that Jenny could call to receive help. Instead, Jenny flipped through the phone book and found the phone number for Beavis Funeral Home. When she got through, Jenny explained the grisly situation and begged for the funeral home to respond. Answering her cries for help, owner Russell Beavis and his 16-year-old son Rocky rushed over to the Sims residence. As father and son entered the bedroom, young teen Rocky Beavis could feel his life change for good. "Within moments I was scared. You know, when I saw my father's reaction, his fear, his concern, shock quickly turned to fear because it had just happened." Moments later, father and son discovered that both Dr. Sims and his wife Helen were still breathing, but unconscious. It wasn't much longer before neighbors began to hear about what happened at 641 Muriel Court and came to see the commotion. By the time Detective Larry Campbell arrived at the scene, a good amount of people had already been inside the house. Cigarettes had been put out in the ashtray, and some people had taken household items from the home as souvenirs. Larry Campbell called the sheriff and chief detective of the police department to notify them of the murder. Dr. Sims soon passed away before he was transported to the hospital, but Helen clung to life and remained in a coma for the following 9 days before passing away. Detectives arriving on the scene were quick to rule out robbery as a motive for the murders. Besides the things that trespassers had taken and touched, virtually nothing was out of place. There was no sign of forced entry, leading investigators to believe the Sims had allowed the murderer into their house willingly. Nothing had been stolen either. The cash on the dresser and the valuable coin collection inside were untouched. Whoever had come into the Sims' home had been someone that the family knew and had obviously spent some time cleaning up the crime scene of any incriminating evidence.
As the night went on, it became clear that law enforcement was not prepared for a crime as serious as this to happen in Tallahassee. Nothing like it had ever happened before in the town. As Rocky Beavis recalls, they went in and made coffee, probably textbook what you shouldn't do. Failing to close the crime scene to the public made gathering evidence extremely difficult for investigators. There were dozens of different fingerprints found, mostly from those who had come by to see what happened. This made it nearly impossible to identify a suspect through crime scene evidence. When questioning neighbors, one recounted hearing screaming at around 10:45 p.m., but figured it was neighborhood kids out playing and didn't contact police. At one point during the investigation, a nearby pond was drained in hopes of finding a murder weapon. Everyone was on edge after the murders, even more so as investigators failed to turn up any solid evidence. The residents of Tallahassee were so afraid of a serial killer being on the loose that Halloween that year had been canceled. Detective Larry Campbell was left confounded as to what happened to the Sims family. As the investigation drew on, it became clear that the Sims were a well-liked family who had no real enemies and no outstanding motivation to be murdered. By all accounts, they were kind people who lived good lives through the eyes of God. Dr. Robert Sims was born in 1924 in Meridian, Mississippi, where he grew up working on his father's farm. In 1943, at age 18, Dr. Sims was drafted into the U.S. Army during World War II. After the war, Robert met Helen Solly back in his hometown of Meridian and they married. Helen was only 17 and 5 years younger than Robert when they married, but the two quickly started a family and moved to Tallahassee, Florida in the early 60s. Once in Tallahassee, Robert earned his bachelor's degree and eventually his PhD. He began to work as a director of data processing for the Florida Department of Education. Helen had been a secretary at the First Baptist Church of Tallahassee up until a few days before the murders. Their daughters Jenny and Judy were described as smart and responsible young women who were in the honor society at their high school. Their younger sister Joy had been known to be a kind soul and good friend at the middle school she attended. There were only a few people that were connected to the Sims family that might want to harm them, and Detective Larry Campbell hoped that one of them would be linked to the crime.
The initial suspect of 641 Muriel Court murders was a highly respected pastor, C.A. Roberts. Helen worked as his secretary up until a few days before she was murdered, where she abruptly quit. Once news of the Sims family murders began showing up in the papers, women from around Tallahassee began to call the police department to assure them they hadn't been the ones to murder the family. When asked why detectives would be led to believe that, Pastor Roberts' secret affair soon came to light. Although married, Pastor Roberts had multiple affairs with various women in the town. After a blacklight scan was done of his office, it was obvious many of his extramarital affairs had been carried out in that room. Investigators learned that Helen had quit her job after becoming fed up with her boss's affairs and therefore had reason to believe Pastor Roberts might have murdered her and her family because she knew too much. After some investigation, Pastor Roberts was ruled out as a suspect as he had been seen by multiple witnesses at the FSU football game. In fact, he was captured on video in both the first and second half of the game. This gave him a solid alibi. He wouldn't have had time to leave and murder the Sims family before returning to the football game in the time for the second half. A few witnesses claimed they did not see Pastor Roberts during the halftime and that he returned in different clothes during the second half, but this is just speculation. Detective Campbell said he was almost certain that Pastor Roberts had not murdered the Sims family despite his wrongdoings. There were other suspects in the initial investigation, but all of them came up with alibis or were otherwise deemed unlikely to have committed the act. Years later, with no suspects, a few people started to come forward with new evidence that might help to solve the cold case. While looking over old documents from the case, investigators found a letter written by Peggy Howells detailing how her husband had confessed to murdering the Sims family. Peggy alleged that her husband, Robert Howells, gave her a detailed account of how he had murdered the parents and daughter while the new couple were driving to their honeymoon spot. When investigators looked into Robert Howells' life, they discovered that Howells was a violent man and a drunkard who often beat his wife and threatened to kill his stepson. Police had been called to their residence multiple times over domestic issues. When Howells was questioned by police, he claimed that his now ex-wife was trying to get back at him over their divorce. After passing a polygraph test and finding that his fingerprints did not match any at the crime scene, Robert Howells was cleared as a suspect.
The last two suspects had been persons of interest since the murders happened in 1966. Mary Charles LaJoie and Vernon Fox Jr. were a couple known by the neighborhood as being rather odd. Mary, who went by Charlie, was described as odd and obsessed with death. She had been caught breaking into funeral homes a few times, including the funeral home that responded to the murders initially. Her boyfriend, Vernon, was a loner and was speculated to be a peeping Tom. His parents lived on the property directly behind the Sims. A week before the murders, he had been spotted peeping on Joy Sims in her bedroom. On the night of the murder, both Charlie and Vernon said they were at a drive-in movie theater. Charlie claimed that the couple had stayed for more than 2 movies, but the ticket collector who knew them said they only stayed for 1. After the movie, Vernon claimed that he and Charlie went to a lover's lane to have sex. Charlie, on the other hand, claimed she had not slept with Vernon until a year after the murders. Both had rather conflicting stories, but neither were arrested due to lack of evidence. It wasn't until the 1980s that Charlie came back to Tallahassee to give more information about her now ex-husband Vernon's involvement with the Sims. Charlie gave a 6-hour interview to investigators, only giving enough information to keep the conversation going. When talking about the murder, Charlie would ask what theoretically would happen if she and Vernon were involved in the murders. She seemed more interested in the $10,000 reward money than bringing any new information about the case.
I knew flat ass for sure that I went in there alone.
You do know. Well, you do know.
I know maybe in the back of my mind.
When investigators said she would end up in a mental hospital if she was linked to the murders, Charlie became cold and their interview ended shortly after. Vernon's involvement seemed likely, especially considering the state of the crime scene and his father being a professor of criminology at FSU. However, detectives did not have enough evidence from Charlie's interview to arrest either of them. Although Vernon Fox's involvement in the 641 Muriel Court murders seems possible and the most believable out of the other suspects, Vernon has never been arrested or charged. Vernon is still alive today and has denied his involvement in the murders. However, when asked about his whereabouts the night of the murder, his details are murky. Both he and Charlie had conflicting stories that changed slightly, but he was able to recount other things in great detail. In 2016, Vernon gave an interview to FSU students for their documentary about the murders called 641 Muriel Court. In it, they mention his lack of detail during the night of the murders as well. The documentary features some great interviews and testimonials from friends and neighbors of the Sims family, as well as more in-depth details about the case. We highly recommend watching the documentary if you'd like to hear all of the little details involving the case. You can watch the documentary for free by clicking the link in the description below.
As of now, the 641 Muriel Court murders have remained unsolved. Although there have been suspects, not one person has been arrested due to lack of evidence. Because of the technology and protocols of the 1960s, we may never have a resolution to the murders. Residents of Tallahassee still hope that one day justice will be brought to Dr. Sims, Helen, and Joy.
Have a theory as to who killed the Sims family? Want to suggest a topic for a new video? Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. We also have opened a merch store with t-shirts and sweatshirts. If you're interested in purchasing from our collection, click the link in the description below or check out the store section of our channel. If you like this video, please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel, as well as hitting the notification bell.
We hope you enjoyed this video and have a happy Halloween.